One, I understand that it's really hard to get up on the second day and listen to something, but what we promise is a lot of conflict, a lot of opinions, will be extremely opinionated, and it would be an easier type of content that any of you would appreciate, and you had these problems in the past. So, the most contagious issue in our industry, rates. The question is whether we can say something interesting, something new, or something that would be heatedly disputed in the future, and we hope we can. So, I named the slide after one of my favorite movies by Coen brothers. It's called Brother, Where Art Thou? So here, maturity, where art thou? And I'm talking about our industry. We're thinking we're mature. God, we are discussing customizing empty, various complex processes and everything, automation, and still the industry is in complete mess when it comes to rates and everything like that. That is, expectations, pricing expectations. Some clients have absolutely unreasonable ones, and some suppliers voice them as well, offering rates that are absolutely unsustainable. Quality requirements, either non-existent or extremely vague. Quite a number of suppliers and quite a number of clients lack even basic industry knowledge. They do not know what they are buying. They do not know what exactly they are expecting, what problems they will encounter. Finally, black box approaches, they're very common, they're very popular, but the black box is a black box. There is a lot concealed inside, and you never know what it is. And it's not always for good. Finally, impure intentions. Regrettably, we still encounter these from time to time, and it's pretty often. So, as a result, clients definitely do not get what they want in many, many cases. Providers and individuals, they feel underappreciated, underpaid, need to cut corners beyond reason, and most of you on the supplier side have heard about it or know the pain yourselves. Whom does it benefit? Only two categories of people, and both of them we do not like very much. So it's either unscrupulous people or people who do not care. And the worst thing is, it's not only it benefits in different people, but people who are really competent, who are really passionate, who want to do it well, they are marginalized. So, the compromise. This is the key word here. Because whatever project we undertake, whatever RFP we start, it's always a compromise between costs, quality, risks, and time. So miracles happen, but not very often. So if a priest falls from the bell tower, there is still a chance that he'll not break his neck when falling down. But these chances are slim, to put it mild. Generally, you still need to find a solution that includes some cushioning or some padding so that it doesn't happen. And I'm talking about purchasing questionable translation at very low rates. Well, you may land intact, but chances are slim. And the educated decision is not very easy, and it's not about rates alone. There are many factors involved, and they include budget, timing, and they're all conflicting expectations. So you always need to find the optimal compromise, and it's by far not so easy. Risks that you're ready to accept. In some cases, you are rather risk tolerant. In some cases, you absolutely cannot accept certain risks. We'll talk about it in a minute. And finally, the service level. And the service level is the most underappreciated word in the industry, and it talks about so many things. I mean, this is kind of an overdefined word. It's quality, process, communication, security, technology, whatnot. So what risks? What is risks? So there are generally three types of risks overall. One is human factor related, because as soon as we need to increase our team considerably over a short period of time, as soon as someone suddenly stops replying to your emails or phone calls and disappears, having not completed even 10% of the work. And the most challenging one is to make sure that you provide consistent, high quality, all across the whole project line from month to month. The second type of risks are process and technological ones, and they become very important when we're talking about really complex projects, multiple stakeholders, too many steps inside those procedures and all that stuff. So to a certain extent, if you automate everything, if you include a lot of checks, you can partially offset human-related risks, but only to a certain degree. Moreover, after a certain step, after a certain level, the number of checks and their depth does not actually improve quality. It only increases cost. So there is a compromise here as well. Finally, all the other risks. And do not discount this, do not forget about them, do not discount them by any means just because they're called other. These risks include and comprise a very wide spectrum, including infrastructure, cybersecurity. You've all heard about all those things. Sometimes, someday they will get to you. It's not an issue of whether it will happen. It's just only a question of when this will happen. Financial stability, even political and economic landscape changes that are unpredictable and well beyond whatever we can control. So the two questions that both sides, clients and vendors, need to answer are as follows. So first of all, how seriously do these risks affect your production, your process, your resources, everything? But it's not the only one. In many cases, it's also whether you are affected financially, whether you have responsibility, whether your client suffers, and because of that, they are not ready to tolerate this risk because they do not consider your company trustworthy. So these are the two questions, and do not forget about the second. So the summary. It's an interesting thing. Most of the risks are absolutely generic. They are exactly the same for any service industry. They are no different than translation industry by any means, except for a single category, which is the risks, all the risks involved with empty use. This is our unique one, and we'll talk about them more. And of course, they are tightly intertwined. As I said already, some of the technologies can offset human-related risks partially, but do not think that you can offset them altogether. So what do we need to do? It depends on where you are. If you're a client, you need to prioritize risks. There are too many of them. Some of them you just need to forget about them or discount them and say, okay, we're ready to deal with that. You need to set clear expectations, and most importantly, you need to ask the right questions. Suppliers. Well, first of all, we need to understand that risk assessment is very essential for clients, at least for mature clients, for quite a number of them actually. So you need to be ready to talk not just about what you used to talk about, rates, resources, where your office is or whatever else, technologies, but also talk about infrastructure, scalability, security, financial stability, potential disaster prevention and recovery, cyber insurance or other types of insurance. Any serious client will ask these questions sooner or later. Or if you want to play in the league with the big boys, you'll definitely need to answer these questions, at least for yourself and then for the clients. So the other area, we did not decide to go ahead with the recipes how to do it properly. We decided to start with various misconceptions and fallacies, and our industry is overwhelmed with them. So first of all, the one that we dedicated 3 slides to is the bane of packaged simplified rates. Some of you, Alexander is smiling. He probably knows what's going to be in that slide. I hear you, someone very, very loudly here. Thank you so much. So what is that? I mean, formally, the definition is when you combine alternative types of work in one and the same rate. And this is, for example, the notorious rate per translated page. So what is this? Guys, I hear someone there very, very loudly. So what is the rate per translated page and why is it so bad? So many clients think, and even some suppliers think, that packaged rates are good because they simplify the quotes, they simplify budget estimates and everything. Well, absolutely wrong. And why is it so bad? What you see in the picture, it's a screenshot from a very popular cartoon. It's not what you think. The cartoon is called The 38 Parrots, and there they measured the length of the python. So the thing is, why is it so bad? Because generally, as far as you charge per page, it's not for 250 new words. It's for everything included there. It could be a partially machine translation, partially edited machine translation, partially TM recycling with various recycling rates, and finally, some of it may still be human translation from scratch. And the productivities are totally different there. And you never know in what proportion all these types of services represented in this similarly, kind of benign, simple rate per page. So, part two. So, as we said, depending on the particular project or client or line of work, these proportions can vary dramatically and absolutely unpredictably, which means that you have to make very strong assumptions. What level of TM reuse, what level of 100% matches recycling, what level of empty use, if it's allowed at all, how much you'll have to retranslate from scratch, how good or bad is this empty, that is, how much you will have to rework manually and waste time. So the worst thing about it, it completely destroys the connection between project cost on one hand and your effort on the other. And I call it a double-edged black box. So either both sides, the client and the vendor, have no idea what they are selling or buying at all. Under some cases where somebody acts as a fool, one side knows it all, but the other is absolutely unsuspecting and they fall into the trap. And you make wild, erroneous guesses. There is no way to avoid them. And regrettably, it creates a perfect environment for collusion because you can hide so much within those rates. Finally, suppose a client is running an RFP. Everyone has encountered these cases, and they ask for a certain price per page. So you do not know page density, the amount of recycling, the quality of machine translated. Actually, it means that you provide rates based on guesswork, and you can be wrong by 100% easily. So instead of the straightforward rates that you can easily get when you divide everything by category, that is level of recycling, MTTM. And here I've provided the photograph of the first ever world typist. Her name is Lillian Scholes, and this photo was taken in 1860s. It was approximately 150 years ago. And she was the daughter of the creator of the typewriter and the first typist in the world ever. So why am I mentioning her? Because when we used to count in typewritten pages, there was only one way to create or translate content. You typed it. Everything was manual. It was a typed page and that's it. Nowadays, we not only have various types of services integrated into that, as I already mentioned, machine translation, translation memory, translation from scratch, and TM has various different types of recycling. But we can easily count it using automated word counts. It's no longer counting pages because there was no way to count words at the time when they were typing everything. So if you want to do proper measurements, if you want to connect your effort to the project pricing, you should stop measuring translation in pints. And the worst thing is, packaged rates cannot even be compared objectively because depending on how bold you are or how adventurous you are, you know, if you're a cautious vendor who used to provide good quality, you'll be on the cautious side and your rates will seem higher than somebody's who is extremely adventurous. They provided rates that are half of yours. They do not know what's included and why it's needed at all. And still, the client will select them, and then they'll say, oh, sorry, we cannot provide these services at these rates because we didn't expect that TM recycling will be so bad. We didn't expect that you'll not accept raw empty or whatever. As a result, it's complete confusion. And the worst case here is that imagine that a couple of RFP participants, they already know pretty well what's included, what the recycling rate is, what the client is ready to accept. Then it simply means that all the others are at a disadvantage, or it creates a perfect environment for unfair play. Now, the other typical delusion. I called it avoiding extremes. So freelance is extreme, and many of you will probably subscribe that translators and editors are the only people who define quality. Everything else doesn't matter. And the companies are heartless and useless exploiters of our labor. And clients should work with us directly. Well, you've heard the manifesto. Well, I mean, it sounds kind of bold, but believe me, I heard it at the highest levels at international organizations like the ATA or many others. I mean, many people still share this kind of extreme viewpoint. And there is a technocrats extreme. That is, some companies promote it, especially those working in the technology area. That is, their technology is so good, their checks are so pervasive, translators do not matter at all, because they'll double check everything, they'll fix everything automatically, and the result will be perfect, no matter whom you use, and whether there are any human beings involved at all. Well, and of course, these are the people who prefer to apply empty, do minimal edits, and that's it. And of course, they'll promise you the highest quality ever. Okay, so let's forget about the extremes. In real life, we need both, and everything depends on the conditions. So we need both solid management, good technology, good upstream quality, and biodiversity, and inevitable huge rate variance are normal. And later on, we'll talk more about where each type of service is applicable. Actually, they're not compatible, and you choose one or the other depending on the process you have. So now I'm happy to give the microphone and pass the microphone and the baton to Fedor. Please.
Thank you, Leonid. Let's talk a bit more about MT-related risks and misconception. Let's concentrate on the scenario where machine translation is subsequently edited by a human, because it can be easily compared to already familiar case with editing matches from translation memory. Popular misconception is that editing after MT results is noticeably worse compared to human translation. At the first glance, editing MT output is very similar to editing translation memory matches. In both cases, errors in recycled translations should be filtered out by a human. What's the difference? The Our answer is as follows. Machine translation application with the subsequent editing does not negatively affect translation quality, but seriously increases the risks of serious errors at showstopper level that may slip through the cracks, and the result will be really terrible. One obvious and important production-related conclusion is as follows. You need more time to edit after machine translation compared to TM recycling. Sorry. This extends to all translated content because often there is no way to distinguish between human translated and machine translated matches. Translator may post-edit some good match, make an error, and then this translation will appear in translation memory as a human. Machine translation, you may see an increase, sometimes quite significant, but risks of overlooking serious errors also increase significantly. To use or not to use machine translation, that is the question, but the answer is that using or not using MT is not so much about quality, it's about selecting the right balance between cost and risks. Okay, next slide. We all love to to collect some errors that MT provides, but usually these errors appear when something is translated out of context. You see an example on the screen, and from my experience, I can remember a great example when credit card was translated into English as map. And the client was very unhappy with such a result, of course. We think that review after editing, review after machine translation post-editing is required to achieve human quality because of those risks falling through the cracks. Why it is important to review the machine translation even more carefully than working with TM matches. The editors usually have limited time to deal with each translation unit, and the possibility of something bad happening is rather huge. Next popular misconception is that you do not need to review translation after the original machine translation editor. Why? Because somebody has already edited it, and why do you need to review it once more? Proponents or clients with a limited budget of this viewpoint typically say that you don't need to spend more money, no need for the second editor or proofer. In reality, even without machine translation, translators often recycle a significant share of units from translation memory, and this is considered much less risky than working with the machine translation output. But when we add the machine translation to the pack, we get even more diverse types of translation mixed in the resulting content, including recycled 100% matches, repetitions, edited fuzzy translation memory matches, machine translation units, units translated from scratch or completely rewritten machine translation units. And this is actually all about the risks. Moreover, the dominating case today deals with the small fragments added to the content or updated in the huge amount of content. And changes are often introduced out of context, and we typically have no clue about the origin of each particular unit. Our conclusion is that given all the additional risks related to machine translation, the suggestion to eliminate the second pair of eyes, like somebody editing after the empty editor in this scenario, sounds like a blasphemy. Next misconception, and this is actually my favorite, that machine translation-related discounts can be based on automated metrics or editing speed. We think that all automated metrics, maybe except Meteor, but in the nearest future, have some design level issue. They measure the mechanical difference between two texts and are usually heavily biased for creating text for MT training compared to alternative targets. These scores demonstrate no general correlation with the localization quality assurance results or editing effort. Score variations depending on the reference are too massive. Editing distance is not a reliable measure of editing effort either. Why? Because you may have a huge sentence, huge paragraph from MT output, and you only need to change one word that will change the meaning of the sentence totally. For example, left or right, up, down, maybe you need just to delete some negation, like no. And the editing distance will be minimal, actually. But you need to read and fully understand the source text. You need to read and fully understand the machine translation output before you make this tiny change. Okay. Our summary is that n-gram-based automated quality scores and editing distance cannot be trusted as good indicators of MT editing effort. Actual MT editing effort, human effort, can be either assessed experimentally or estimated based on a holistic LQA. In both cases, we need to analyze a reasonable-sized representative subset of translation. More sophisticated, reliable AI-based algorithms may change the situation. I already mentioned Meteor, that calculates the score based not only based on mechanical similarity, but on possible usage of synonyms, stems, and so on. But at the moment, we actually don't see a convincing demonstration of this concept. Leonid?
Okay, thank you. So now let's go back to what we promised. That is how to build a clean rates structure. So the thing is, first of all, we need the structure, and both clients and suppliers need that, because other than that, you go into guessing, you go into all types of problems. So first of all, it should reflect actual effort behind each procedure and each task. Second, for each type of work and each productivity that's significantly different, you need a separate rate. That's it. Do not try to generalize beyond reason. Then, alternative types of work, I'm just summarizing, like machine translation or translation memory or just translation from scratch. Never mix them in a single rate. That will be a delusion. So either you'll be kind of misleading yourself, or you're going to be misleading the client, or both. Consecutive types of work, easily. You can mix, say, translation and then editing into a single rate, no problem, because they're consecutive, they are not alternative, they do not run in parallel. That's fine. Finally, even with consecutive ones, do not mix rates with different units. That is, you cannot combine together, say, translation and editing rate with a page setting, or DTP as we call it in the industry, because these units and these efforts are absolutely, totally unrelated. As soon as you do that, you introduce very strong guesses there, and I definitely do not recommend it, because you'll be fooling yourself or deceiving the client, or, as I said, both. So, the other step is, this is the most contentious issue I've ever heard, or at least that's what the clients say. Do discuss PM fees, minimal fees, and additional work. Why? Because, of course, you cannot talk about it, you can try to hide it, but actually every supplier, from freelancers to companies, they incur that effort. Because even for a product of 0 size, 2 words to translate, you still get the work, you register it, you send it to someone, even your colleague, to do. You have to check that you haven't introduced any errors, you have to return it, you have to bill for it, and if it's an outside resource, you still have to pay for it and invoice it. So there is a lot of work involved, and the project is 0. If you pay a 2-word project by word, that's it. You get nothing. You spend at least a half hour to an hour's effort. So that's the so-called PM or project setup fee, minimal fees. Because if we try to be honorable and we send a small job to a freelancer, the freelancer is paid not for 3 words or 5 words that she or he translated, but for a half hour or an hour, depending on the agreement. So in a sense, the company, the bloodsucker, it gets onto the difference between his rates or the freelancer's rates and the rate they pay us. It does not cover the setup effort and all the other services involved, period. Finally, additional work. This is the worst type of it, because no rates are all inclusive. There are always types of work that clients want you to do, and you know they're not included in rates. Very simple thing. Some clients assume that glossary management and work is included in translation. No, it's not. It's an absolutely different type of work. You need to manage glossary, you need to figure out which words are terms, which words are not. You need to make sure that you work with definitions, with use cases and everything. So it's just an example. No, sorry, if you ask us to do some glossary work or glossary management, we'll have to ask for additional fees. So that's additional fees. Well, you can try and skimp on them. I mean, whether it's a multilingual company just trying not to pay freelancers, or a big direct client trying not to pay us. But that would be bad, and not just because it's morally reprehensible, but because actually it means that we're still hiding this, because we still incur the charges. I mean, we cannot hide them from ourselves. It simply means that we either charge a higher margin on top of the supplier rates, or we select the most marginal, the least qualified suppliers, or we know something about their projects that actually there is a lot of very simple work, all the projects are uniform, our overhead is minimal and everything. But just discuss them openly. Be honest. You need transparency in both ways in the relationship, and actually this is the way to avoid artificial rate hikes, because, you know, sometimes the project will be simple, you will not incur overhead, but you've already included this in the markup. So it will also be bad for the client, and clients who do not realize it are simply kind of not thinking enough. Finally, rate definitions. Why do we need them? They are an absolutely inalienable part of any contract. because you need to know what's included and what's not. Say that the glossary management is not included in word rates, or say page setting is not included in word rates, or whatever else, or say we will be able to check all the translations in the website or in the user interface or in the game, but it's a separate effort. It has nothing to do with translation. Poor translators are trying to do their work quickly, and they have absolutely no time to check every translation inside your interface. And this eliminates misunderstanding. So, for instance, our company has a very long, very detailed addendum to our standard contract where all the rates and all types of work are defined. For instance, translation rate includes translation, review, and automated verification. It doesn't include a lot of other things like project setup, terminology, updates, checks against user interface, you name it. Finally, best practices. What is a clean rate structure? So first of all, as we mentioned, provide very clear definitions so everybody understands what's included, what's not, what it's all about, what you promise, what you deliver. Second, divide similar tasks not by tool, but by productivity. A simple example, you are doing page setting. You can do it in InDesign, which is more complex, or you can do it in Word. No Word, no InDesign, no other tool. I mean, there could be a million other tools on the market. The way to do it so that it's reasonable and manageable is simple. It's simple, medium, complex, or ultra-complex page setting. That's it. You can always divide it into 2 to 4 categories, and that's it. Or, say, hourly rates. Once again, 3 rates are typically sufficient. It's consulting rate, the highest one, PM and engineering or technical, and all others. Apply multipliers. William Ockham, actually Ockham is not his last name, it's the place where he was born. He said, do not multiply entities without necessity. That is why we need to use multipliers, because that way when you change rates, you'll only change a couple of them and everything else will be calculated automatically, and that way you make it clean, you make the structure good, and everything is good. For instance, say our company charges twice as much for a standard 2D cartoon compared to a standard 2D video. That's it. Multipliers. No separate rates. Finally, if you're not sure what the productivity is, just charge it by the hour. Agree with the client that you provide all the explanations. Translation rate structure example, I'll run through that. But it's for translation, I'll publish the presentation later. Yeah, because we're almost at the end of it, and that's why I'm just running through that. Empty discount conundrum. Do we have 1 minute for questions or not? No. So the thing is, what is left is that if you are editing empty at twice the rate, at twice the speed, it means that the maximal discount you'll be able to provide is below 25%, because there is also editing after that and it's more time consuming. So remember that. It's not that simple. Finally, the SLA. Most underappreciated thing. It's everything else. I'm speeding it up as much as I can. So the SLAs cover everything, and that includes cybersecurity in case your client gets sued for some big omission or mistranslation or something. It means your infrastructure is stable. It means that your internet is always working and you have a backup channel. It means that you need processes and special procedures to cover up in case something bad happens. Say your office is flooded or there is no electricity and there is a way for you to move all people into their homes. Well, we all did that, and everything else. Never underestimate it. Finally, why the SLAs affect rates? It's simple. Because if your priest jumps from this bell tower every day and you want him to stay alive consistently, you need also to provide a trampoline and an anemometer to figure out what the wind speed is and what its direction. And also, all additional rates risks increase rates. That's inevitable. That is why you may need to work either with freelancers if everything is relaxed and you pay less, but you're not in a hurry, or you'll have to use companies and pay more. That's normal. So the fair rate summary, that's it. Analyze risks, figure out the SLA, that's the most important part. Reconcile the SLA and the budget. You may reduce the volume or increase the budget. Define a rate structure which is clear and simple and understandable. And finally, provide a good set of rate definitions. And this is the final animation. Rates cannot exist in space. They will be attracted to the closest planet or star available. They will fall, inevitably. But as far as you provide the whole framework with risks, budget, service level agreements, rate structure, and rate definitions, then it will be solid and you'll be able to use it, and it will be a fair and reasonable approach. I'm sorry we tried to make it.
Thank you, Leonid. We're very sorry to we don't have time for question because we have an online speaker waiting for us in the room. Thank you very much. We could listen to you forever.